Well, you can see that we've still got rain, so forget about doing any chronographing today. In fact, it's actually raining right now, so that even going to the range is a questionable activity. We're going to have to wait until next weekend to do that chronograph testing of those duplex lows at 357. And time to go inside. It's coming down hard now. So shooters and reloaders out there, on this rainy day we can't go to the range, so we're going to do a video instead on the Lee auto drum powder measure. And this is a video response to Mark Gman. And his question is, does the Lee auto drum powder measure work well with large charges of rifle powder, like a big Magnum case? Well, we know that the rifle charging die comes in long and short. And the long charging die can handle cases up to 2.6 plus inches long. Well, the problem is our big Magnums that take 80 grain charges oftentimes are longer than that. For instance, the 375 Holland Magnum case is 2.834 inches long, so technically the Lee powder through die for rifle cannot handle that length. And therefore we shouldn't be able to use the Lee auto drum for charging the 375 Holland Magnum either. Well, let's see about that. And yes, it turns out that on many of our older presses that don't have enough clearance, you cannot use the Lee powder through rifle die for long cases. But if you have a newer press that has the large openings, let's see what happens. Lo and behold, you can actually set the Lee custom cast press up with the rifle charging die, the long one, and actually be able to handle the 375 Holland Magnum. So you see that die is screwed in there and it's been tightened down, and now we've got the adjustment made so that, as Mark Gman says, if you look at this little window here, if the case goes in and this plastic comes right to the top of that window, you're okay. But if it goes to the top of the window and you still have more of the press to run the case in, then you're in trouble, because then the pressures on this system are pretty hard and you might get bending of this and even breaking of this part. So let's see what happens when we run this press. So there's the case going into the powder die. Now watch as we throw the powder. There is the bottom of the stroke at the same time that the powder is being thrown, and the case has received the powder charge. The mechanism has reached the top of the window and it hasn't gone any further. No bending of that connector. So let's look at that again. What we have here is the powder's already filled the measuring chamber, and now as the case activates the powder measure, there's the powder dropping into the case, and we heard it going in there. Now when we release the press, the chamber refills nice and smooth. That 80 grain charge of 4831 gives us 100% loading density. Notice there's no damage to the case mouth, no crushing, no abuse to the case mouth. That's what we want. So there's the first charge, 79.5. We'll do 10 of those and see what we get. Well, we use all 4 of these cases to throw 4 powder charges, then weigh them, and then throw 4 more, and then 1 more to get 10 cases, 10 charges. And now let's go ahead and tabulate the results of the 10 throws. So there are the 10 throws. And I'm sorry to report that when it comes to real big charges of rifle powder, we got an average of 79.8 grains for the 10. But the range goes from 79.4 low to 80.1 high. And that is a 7/10 grain variation, which doesn't make rifle shooters happy. So when you're doing big charges of rifle powder, we're probably still better off going ahead and throwing a charge, putting it into a pan, and then trickling up, and then going ahead and putting it back into the case to give us the security of knowing that our powder charges are well within proper limits. Now, if we use the auto drum to do smaller charges, we're only getting 1/10 of a grain variation, not 7/10. But this test would not be complete unless we tried the spherical powders and see how that does. Large charges of spherical powder in the Lee auto drum. How accurate is that? So we're going to go ahead and use H414, which is a spherical powder, and that should meter better. We'll do the same test. Show you that H414, the little spherical, the ball powder. Now that's a lot different than the stick powder, which is 4831. Heavy sticks. So there's the H414 powder in the powder measure. And you know how Lee says that the auto drum can throw a maximum charge of 80 grains? So I arbitrarily cranked it down a little bit because the H414 is going to be denser powder than the 4831. Well, I cranked it down a little bit, and lo and behold, we're getting a charge of 84.4 grains. So it can throw charges bigger than 80 grains, depending on the powder. So we'll go ahead and throw a charge into this case of the H414 so you can see how that runs. Here we go. There's the powder dropping into the case, and there is the refill of the measuring chamber. Now please bear in mind that the 84.4 grain charge of H414 is not appropriate for some bullet weights in the 375 Holland Magnum. So I'm not telling you what bullet weights I'm using, so that you can't really go with the 84.4. It's for test purposes only. Well, I went ahead and threw 10 charges, and look at that. The first 5 are 84.4 with only one at 84.3. That's pretty good accuracy. Basically, only a 1/10 variation for 5 charges total. But then the next 5 gave me some variation. We have one charge at 84.8, which is the high, and 84.3, which is a low. So there's your low, there's your high. The average is 84.47 grains. And what we wanted was 84.40. So that's pretty good average. And the variation's only 0.5, and that was only with one charge at 84.3 and one charge at 84.8. So the standard deviation, if we were going to calculate that, would be very low. Apparently, we can go ahead and just throw the charges with the spherical powders without having to weigh them, except maybe every 10th charge just to do spot checks. So that's not bad performance from the auto drum powder measure. We can even load big charges in magnums, and as long as we're under a maximum charge by, say, a grain, we're on safe ground. And we can actually load longer cases than the specifications that Lee says in the dies. Plus, we can actually throw slightly heavier charges than 80 grains, as the Lee auto drum specifications state. Not bad. Bye for now.